Hi, everybody. Welcome to this creative sustainability session hosted by Seed&Spark. My name is Emily Best. I'm the founder and CEO of Seed&Spark. I'm so excited about today's session because Scout Raskin is a person that I had the great fortune to meet several years ago. I'm going to have to get Scout to verify this with me. I think it was at the Louisiana Film Festival in Baton Rouge. I hope I didn't get that wrong. And I've just been thinking about Scout's work a lot lately and the arc of her career. These sessions are really meant to inspire, to uplift, to give you some ideas about things to do moving forward. I don't know about all of you, but the utter context switching of the average day where you're Zooming, and for me, there's kids and so many considerations. And then all of a sudden it's like, hi, I'm online at an event, I guess. The first and most important thing for us to do here is acknowledge the land that we're on. I am joining you from Carmel, New York, which is on the unceded territory of the Lenape and Wappinger tribes. The nativeland.ca app is how I find out whose land I'm actually on every place I land, and I highly recommend it. And there will be in the comments an opportunity to contribute to the First Nations COVID-19 Relief Fund. It's right there in the chat. We have some amazing partners from this for this event. I'm very, very excited. Oh dear. Sorry. I lost my streaming window because technology. Our partners for this event, Animation World Network, for 25 years, one of the internet's leading and most trusted resources for credible, informative, entertaining, and crucial news. And Kaleidoscope, which is a professional network for the immersive industry. The stuff they do is so cool. So they connect XR creators with industry leaders to develop, fund, and distribute their work. And their mission, like ours, is to support creators who push the culture forward through immersive art, games, apps, and experiences. Kaleidoscope always has amazing grant funds that are open. You can put your money in and be responsible for funding amazing artists. I highly recommend it. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our treasured guest, Scout Raskin.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for a little talk about my other career as an animation producer for animated television. So I'm here to answer your questions and talk about what it's like working in animation, how to get started, all that kind of stuff.
Thank you so much. So Scout, where did you enter? I know the answer to this, but I want you to answer it for them. Where did you put your foot into the entertainment business? How old were you and how'd you get started?
So I got started in entertainment at age 5, actually, as like a model and doing commercials in the DC area. And then my big break, if you will, came at age 7. I was in John Waters' film Crybaby, which is 30 years old this year. So now you know how old I am, but yeah, I was in that movie. I played little Susie Q. So if you're looking for something to kind of take your mind off the world situation, go watch Crybaby. I think it's available on Amazon. And so as a kid, you know, the DC Baltimore area, I was a child actor. And then once after college, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna head to LA, see if I can rejuvenate this career. And what I realized was that I actually prefer being behind the camera more than being in front of the camera. So I'm a very creative person, and animation by far is the most, what I feel to be one of the most creative mediums that you can work in. So that's why it appealed to me.
But did you, first of all, I just have to go back and say, I've seen Crybaby 100 times, probably, like 100 times.
Yeah.
One of my favorite movies. And when we met, we were on a panel together, and then she casually drops that fact. And then I actually couldn't speak for a little. I was like not a good panelist after that because I was like, oh my God, I love that. Such a cult classic. So I'd be really curious. Did you grow up drawing a lot? Like, was animation a natural draw because you're like, oh, this is just an extension of a thing I already do?
Actually, no, I'm not an artist at all. I do not possess the skills to draw. However, I do believe that if you have some natural talent, you can learn to develop that skill. But I always loved cartoons. I loved the creative nature, the inventiveness of animation. You know, when you're working on a film and TV set, there's a lot of limitations. You know, location you got to find, weather, time of the year, you know, whether all the cast is available like that second to be there on set that day. Like there's a lot of factors that really make live action production hard. And especially in our now COVID world, live action is gotten even more difficult. However, animation, you know, we just draw everything. So if you need there to be a snowstorm, you draw snow on the ground. You know, if you need the actors to come there, they can record anywhere in the world and you can just drop it right in and you've got it. So I really, in terms of all the mediums, animation, I feel like is the one that is the most creative, where everybody's creative voice comes together and makes something. Because, you know, on a live action set, you know, the lighting's important, the grips, the gaffers, all those people are really important, but they're not really doing as much of the creative work as people in animation do.
Yeah, so talk to me about how you got, like, what was your first project in and how did it come together? Like, who were the people that you had to collaborate with?
So I have a kind of a untraditional entry into animation. So what I want to talk about first is sort of the traditional path. Right. The traditional path, if you're interested in being in animation, there's two sort of areas. There's either you're going to be on the artist side or you're going to be on the production side. I'm on the production side. And the way to think about it is, you know, say we're on a moving train, right? You know, the artists are formulating what the train looks like on the outside, right? But the production staff are the people that are the engine. They're making it go. Without our production people, it would just be a bunch of artists drawing stuff with no schedule. They'd just be sitting around drawing things and it wouldn't really be going forward towards anything. So depending on what path appeals to you the most, there's different ways. I'm in production, which means that I don't really do a lot of the creative work of the show. I don't draw, I don't do storyboards, I don't direct. So the way to get into a production path is to start as like a PA in production, a production assistant, and to learn the process of animation from the ground up and move up the ranks. As an artist, if you want to go the artist path, the way is to hone your craft, be really good at your craft, but also take classes to learn how to draw for animation and how to use the programs that people, the computer programs that we use now to make animation. So those are kind of the two ways. My way was very different. I actually started as a production accountant. So I worked on live action shows for like Disney and TNT, just kind of being a paper pusher, you know, filing things and filing cabinets and doing a bunch of data entry and stuff like that. And it was through that experience that I ended up getting a job at the studio that produced Robot Chicken, which is a stop motion animated show that's been going on for about 10 or 11 seasons now on Adult Swim. And that's Seth Green's show, if you guys know, on Adult Swim. It's kind of a pop culture-y type of show where they comment on current things similar to South Park, that kind of humor. And I started working at the studio as a production accountant. So I was doing people's payroll. I was like making sure people got paid properly and dealing with invoicing and kind of all that boring stuff. But right. What that, yeah,
the most important stuff.
Well, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's not super interesting to look at how much, you know, materials for a set costs or things like that. But it is important. It's an important role. So once I was doing production accounting, I'm a creative person and I have a lot of creative energy, so I needed an outlet for that. So what I ended up doing was saving my money, and I basically I was dating somebody at the time who had written a great animated pilot, and I said, you know what, we're going to crowdfund this, very much like Seed&Spark. This was at the very beginning of crowdfunding, so we actually did an Indiegogo and I think a Kickstarter, both of them, and we raised about 10 grand, and I produced and put the whole thing together, and we made an animated pilot that was about 12 to 15 minutes long, because we wanted to sell it as a show. So I kind of taught myself, but it was, you know, I wouldn't have had the understanding of even how to do that if I hadn't worked at the animation studio that was making animation. So while I was, you know, working in accounting, I was learning how all the parts of animation work and how it goes from a script all the way to a final thing. And I taught myself how to do it. I continued to do that for the next few years, and my bosses at that studio were seeing the quality of what I was producing on my own. Not just the scripted material, but also the final product looked great. So they offered me an opportunity to produce Trip Tank for Comedy Central. It was an animated sketch show, all 2D animation. So I went on to curate, you know, we found animated segments on YouTube. I searched YouTube for like 3 months straight. You know, 40 hours a week, I was on YouTube doing deep dives on, you know, animators on YouTube and who they liked and who they were friends with. And I found all these little gems of funny animation. So we put that into the show, and we used that to like develop what the tone of that show was going to be. And then after that, it was like, you know, from that, I just moved on to the next show to produce, and now I'm working as a producer on Central Park, which is the first season you can watch on Apple TV right now. We're actually working on the second season, which should be coming out, I think, next year sometime. So, you know, just kind of move up the ranks that way. Sorry, that was a really long explanation.
That was awesome. I want to actually break some things down, because I know what happens, right? We get really fluent in our producerly ways, and
Right.
we forget when we knew nothing.
Yes.
And I think probably the combination of people watching this are people who have a lot of designs on getting into animation, and also people who are probably watching because they've been too intimidated to get into it. Like I know that it feels inaccessible to people who don't know how to draw, for example, or, you know, so, and, you know, I've produced feature films, and I produced one animated short, and the experiences were so different. They were so different. So I would love for you to just break down, like, you get a script. How do you know it's a good animated script? And walk me through until the moment that we get the finished product.
Sure. So I think that the first question that you need to ask yourself, and sadly, I don't feel like it's asked enough currently in our animated space in media, is why should this be animated? Because, you know, animation, you have so much creativity. You can do fantastical things. Whatever the mind can think up, whatever your creative mind can come up with, you can create that in animation. So you should ask yourself, how am I going to use animation to tell a really interesting story? You don't really just want to animate people just sitting around talking. You don't need to animate that. You could just have people sitting around talking. Yeah. But if there's an element to the show or something trippy or weird, you know, that's the type of stuff that you want to, like, you know, focus on. Like, don't give yourself limitations. So when we get a script for animation, you know, the first thing that I look at is, like, why is it animated? What's interesting about it? And, you know, most of the time they're written very much like a normal script, with the exception of you need to have a lot more description in animation. So for example, say you have a script and it's two people sitting at a table drinking coffee, right? In a normal script, you would just have, maybe at the beginning of the script, you'd have a character description of what these people look like or whatever. And then you're relying on the actors to bring those words to life through their movement, through their face, everything like that. When you're writing an animation script, you don't have actors. The actors are the animators. So you need to describe out, like if you want on a certain line, you want somebody to make a funny expression with their face or gesture with their hand, like write that stuff in there. It does add the length to your script, but you need to tell somebody who needs to draw this how you want the characters to emote, how you want them to walk, how you want them to interact with things in their space. These are all things that a director would go over with an actor on a set, you know, but you know, when in animation, you just have somebody doing the voice in a box, in a room somewhere, you know, you don't have that back and forth in real time. And then once you get the script, typically what you want to do is the first part of animation is getting the voice record done. And the voice record, you know, in my opinion, should be done by a trained voice actor, because those people know how to use their voice to indicate the physicality of what they're saying. So just like an actor, you know, on a set, they're emoting, they're using their hands, you know, they're smiling, they're frowning, all of that stuff is completely lost in the voiceover booth. You have to have an actor who understands how to get that smile across when it's just their voice. So that's number one. You get your voiceover done, and then what you do is you create something called a radio play. And a radio play is where you take the best time somebody said that line, what we call selects, and then you string all that together as if you're just listening to it, like it's a radio show, right? Once you have your radio play, that dictates to a director and to a storyboard artist how they should draw the characters. And they'll draw the characters to match the voice.
You're blowing my mind right now.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense what you're saying, because I could never understand how the drawings were always so perfect to the voice, and now it makes sense. This is amazing. And it's backwards, right? Because so somebody asked, Angelus asked, is film production the same as animation production? And what you're saying is yes, but it's a totally different order of doing things.
Yeah, so the way to think about it is that if you're thinking about live action production, you know, you go out, you shoot everything, you go to post-production where you sit in with an editor, you add in sound effects, you add in music, you cut things together, you do the pacing. With animation, you actually have to do that post-production process at the beginning, because we're actually only going to create the amount of animation that we need. So we plan it ahead. So there's a period, which I'm talking about now with the radio play, where that's part of pre-production, but the audio work is typically in live action production done at the end. So it is a bit backwards, but the reason why it's great that it's that way is you can plan it all ahead, and you know how much animation you need to do, and you know what these characters need to do. But say you get to post-production and you're like, I don't like where this line is being said, right? Or I want to change the line that's said. All you have to do is get the voiceover actor to re-record and just change the animation. You don't have to get the crew back together. You don't have to get the location again. You have total creative control in animation from the beginning to the end. So that's one of the reasons why I like it. So to get back on track, you've got your radio play, you've got your script, you know, already lined up if you want to, and depending on how you work, which this is how I like to work, is I also like to do a temp score and put temp music in there and put sound effects in there, because all of that stuff is going to inform the director and inform the storyboard artists to, you know, and how that they need to draw this to make it come to life. So the next process, once you have the radio play, is our storyboard process. And typically people use this program called Storyboard Pro. And
good name.
It's you can actually, you know, get a cheap subscription to it and play around with it. It's really user-friendly. It's called Toon Boom Storyboard Pro. And what they do is the storyboard artists listen to the audio and they draw the characters. Now, before you got to draw the characters, you got to know what they look like, right? So usually in the beginning of the process, before you might do your casting or whatever, you would do designs for characters so you know what they look like. So you would hire a character designer to draw the main characters. And the way that we typically draw them is we do something that's called a turnaround. And that's just showing the character in different angles, maybe like six or seven different angles on one sheet of paper to show what they look like from the front, from a 3/4, from a profile, from a back. Like, so the storyboard artists and the directors know what the character looks like almost 360. So now you got your characters, you got your radio play. Now the director comes in and he decides shot selection. So very similar to what a director of photography or a director would do in live action sets. That's what the animation director does, except it's all drawn. So the director kind of plans out the shots, plans out what it looks like, plans out how big the characters should be in the frame, how they move. And then that person works with a team of storyboard artists. And those storyboard artists are the ones who actually do the work and bring the audio to life. A lot of times you do also need to create backgrounds. And you might want to do a few backgrounds before you storyboard, because obviously you can't just have characters drawn with a blank background behind them. You need to know what the room looks like. So if we were to draw the room that I'm in, you know, we maybe sketch out like where the bed is, where the dresser is, where the doors are.
Where the animals are.
Where the animals are. There's one right there. Where like, and the backgrounds are drawn based on the angles too. So say, you know, we're doing a shot and you're looking at me like this, but what if we turn the camera completely around? You would need to know what the other side of the room looks like, right? So you got to draw that other view as well. What if we have a shot on the ground that's looking up at the ceiling? Got to know what the ceiling looks like. So that gets drawn. Anyway, sorry, this is like a long, in-depth thing.
This is awesome. And Jim Fine just asked a question that relates to the script and the thing you're talking about, which is, does the tone or the feel of the script help determine the overall look and the characters? Or if that needs to happen, you were saying before, like in an animation script, you need to describe more things, but now you're talking about like a 360 view of a room. How much of that ever comes in the door with a script versus is sort of comes later?
So here's the thing. It's very fluid. If the person writing the script has an idea stylistically of the shots they want to use, like snap zoom to this character at this moment, write that in. Or like slow pan from right to left, write that into the script. If you have that vision. If you don't, that's okay. Usually the visual style of the show is determined when we start doing designs, when we start designing the characters. And a lot of times that stuff actually will change, because just because you want to have a character look a certain way doesn't mean that when you get into animation that design is really going to work well for the actual mechanics of animation. So a lot of times a concept art is great, but you can't, sometimes you have to make adjustments to make it work as you animate. So it's really, just like anything else with animation, it's really just kind of fluid. It doesn't, there's no right or wrong. If you don't have an idea what your world looks like, that's fine. If you do, great. Typically the person on a production who would work with a creator or a writer on the look of the show would be somebody called an art director. And they do have that in live action as well. But the art director is the one who kind of decides what the color palette is, what the line work looks like. Is it really thick lines or is it really thin, spindly lines? Like, what are the colors that we're going to draw from? Like, so it's kind of this process that evolves, especially when you're starting out with something completely new. It's something that evolves like kind of hand in hand with like the script and the initial character designs and the initial type of world designs. It kind of morphs that way. Sorry, I'll try to be more succinct on my answers.
No, this is great. And it's not like we're pressed for time right now. I want to stay on this sort of like the creative world building. Chris Blundell, hi Chris, asked, how does scene length and script pacing for animation compare to live action? I know you said it involves a lot more description.
Right. It really has to do with a few things. It has to do with how fast you want your characters to speak. So, for example, Central Park is in sort of the Bob's Burger type style. It's the same, executive producer on that. So if you've ever seen that show, you know that all the characters speak really, really fast. So our scripts are somewhere around, we like to keep them at around 45 pages for a 22-minute show. So it's about 2 pages per minute is kind of, where we like to land. But of course, if you have a character in your show that speaks really slowly, that could change. But two pages per minute is kind of a good thing.
Awesome.
If you're mostly dialogue. If it's a lot of description, then you don't have to worry about the page count going up if you're describing a lot of stuff. Sure. But the dialogue should be about 2 pages a minute.
That makes a lot of sense. So where I paused you to talk about all of this was at the point at which we've done the script, the audio recording, the storyboarding, the world building.
Yeah. So then what we do is what we call an animatic. And you guys may have heard of animatics because they do use them a lot in movies that they call it previs in live action. So you may have heard it for like movies that have a lot of CG. They do a lot of that stuff. So the animatic is where we're selecting our shots. We're determining the pacing. We're determining, transitions between scenes or whatever. And so the animatic is basically the storyboards and the radio play meshed together and edited. So, even though you draw a character walking across a room, right? At this point is when we determine, do we have enough time for that character to do those 5 steps to go across the room, or do we need to add more time? So it's like, that's when we fine tune what we think is the final timing of the animation. Because animation is very labor intensive and it's expensive, we don't really want to produce more animation than we actually need until we get to post-production and we want to make creative changes. So the animatic is our blueprint. It's locked for time. It's got our audio in there. It's got how every shot is played out. And it's done in a way where it's not animated, but we have what we call keyframes. And a keyframe would be where you show the action of the movement without drawing all the steps in between. So if someone is to pick up a glass off of a table, you might show them with their hand reaching out, their hand touching the glass, and their hand back. We don't need to show every single little thing that happens because that's animation, but we do want to show the movement. So that's our animatic. It's locked. We know this is what we're going to do. At this point is when the bulk of production really starts. That's the end of what I like to call pre-production, but other people will disagree with me. But that to me is like the blueprint of what we're going to make. So we take our animatic and then we do what is called a breakdown. And a breakdown is a very tedious sort of look at this animatic where we decide every piece of art that we need to create to make this happen. So we look at every background. If the angle of a background changes, that's a new drawing. If you go from a straight shot to a down shot, that's a new drawing. So we count all that stuff and we take note of every time we need that. If a character puts on a hat, that hat is what we call a prop. And that prop has to be drawn. And it has to be drawn in all the angles that we need to achieve that motion. It's not just drawing one version of the hat. It's drawing the version of the hat sitting on the table, the hat in the air tilted, the hat on the head. If that makes sense. Yeah. So you do this breakdown, you go through the animatic, you look at everything, you're like, okay, this is all the things we need to make. And then we go into sort of the art side of things. Once we're in the art, that's when you've got your background designers, your character designers, your prop designers, your art director, all the people who do the color for the designs, and you start drawing this out specifically. And now this is something I need to make a caveat about the animatic. The animatic is usually pretty rough. We're not having draftsmen draw the characters perfectly. We're not having people do the backgrounds with perfect perspective lines or anything like that. It's just a blueprint where we know kind of what it should look like. That's the job of the art director, the character designers, the background designers, and the prop people. They're going to draw it anatomically right for the characters. They're going to draw it in the specific, very precise angles that the backgrounds need to be drawn in, etc. Because if you go off of just a storyboard artist just sketching out, like, here's what the room looks like, it's not going to look right. You have to like make it precise within the style of the show that you have. And you will see animation out there where you can tell it kind of looks a little funky and things look off, you know, and sometimes that's a stylistic choice. And sometimes that's just, they don't have great, you know, background people, or they don't care about making it look right, you know. If you don't work in animation, you might not notice those things, but I notice them. So we're doing all of our art now. We're getting all the pieces together that we need to make the animation. And then it just, at this point, it depends on how you're animating it. And just so that I'm clear, all the drawing and everything, it's all done digital. It's all either done in Photoshop or in the animation programs that we use to animate, which I'll talk about in a minute. So we don't really have people drawing on paper anymore or animating on paper anymore. There are some shows that do. Most of them are at Warner Brothers, or it's done overseas in Korea because, fun fact, a lot of Korean housewives are animators and they work at home and they draw still on paper, just so you know. I'm going to skip over the whole timing department, which is what you need to do when you draw on paper, because most everything is digital now. So it's kind of, we use timing on Central Park, but it's kind of on its way out. It's the way, the old way of doing things before we had computers. So we've got all of our designs made. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start to animate. And now here's where I have bad news for people living in America. If you want to be an animator and you actually want to really do real animation, it either has to be independently done in America, or you're going to end up being what's called a retake animator, which is somebody who fixes stuff that comes back from overseas. Because most of the animation that is done in America now, we actually ship the animatic, we ship all the designs, and we send it to Korea, we send it to India, we send it to China, we send it to Canada, and animators up there use the animation programs and make it come to life, and then they send us back finished animation that we give notes on. It's just, that's the cost-effective way to do it. I wish it wasn't that way, because I have a lot of animator friends who now have to learn other skills to like continue to work in the industry. So just FYI.
Well, I want to pause here because
yeah,
I have so many thoughts about capitalism that are not necessary to share on this particular thing, but I know because my dad's cousin used to run an animation studio in Canada, and like, the government just gives you 50% back on that spend. And that makes it really attractive and makes it really hard for anybody, let's say in Minnesota, to ever open an animation studio.
That's true.
Yeah, it's when your government cares about the arts, like lots of great things can happen.
Exactly.
What I was going to ask is, you started this story by saying, you know, you used crowdfunding to raise $10,000 to produce work that caught the eye of your bosses.
Yeah.
How you didn't do all these things in that work?
What do you mean?
Like for $10,000, did you do everything that you just described, including outsource the drawing? I
did.
You did. So
yeah, but that was about 10 years ago. So the cost is significantly more now.
Why is that?
You know, inflation. I mean, I wasn't doing it independently. So I was independently sourcing. I didn't have an animation studio. I was just one person who had money. And I would just find artists and find a director and find storyboard artists and found independent people all over the world that I liked what they were able to produce. And I just negotiated a rate for them to do the work I needed.
And were you writing the scripts, or you were getting scripts, or?
It was a script that was written by my partner at the time.
Right.
So we already had the script, and it was just an independent project that we wanted to do because, you know, a lot of times, especially in entertainment, it's really hard to break in, and sometimes you have to create your own opportunities. So it was a creative outlet for me, but it also was a way for you know, me to show that I was capable of producing. And I wanted to move out quickly. I didn't really want to be a PA and like spend 5 to 10 years just like going up the ranks. And I wanted to use some money and have fun and make something that I really liked, that was like my sense of humor, you know? So,
so I feel like kind of what you're honing in on is, if you want to make animation, this producing really matters, right? Like being able to produce really matters, and being able to find and source those collaborators really matters. How did you said you found these collaborators from all over the world? Where were you finding them? Was it like your job finding them on YouTube, or was it references, or how did you build that first team?
It was largely finding them on YouTube, and then engaging in a dialogue with them to see how serious I thought they were. You know what I mean? Because like I'm giving money to somebody that's not right here. So I have to feel like they're professional enough to actually do the work that I'm paying them to do, and that I'm going to get the quality that I've been promised. So it's not an easy thing. And by far, not everybody worked out perfectly. But, you know, YouTube is a great source for that. There's lots of people making independent animation on YouTube. And it was a matter of just watching the videos and seeing what their sensibilities in comedy were, and seeing what quality of animation they were making just on their own. And this was about 10 years ago, so I haven't been clued into the animation community on YouTube. But I think, you know, it is a good place to start. And a lot of these people were just making parody videos. You know, like parody of Mario, parody of the latest movie that just came out, you know, like I feel like it might be a little bit more difficult today because of how social media has evolved. And now those people are probably more interested in the influencing aspect of it and the personality of themselves, rather than like, hey, I'm this dude and I make funny animations on YouTube. It's more like, it's more about the self and less about the animation these days, I think. I'm not super into it, but
it is interesting to think about the ways in which I talk about this too, that when I crowdfunded my first film, that was back in the days of the Facebook open social graph.
Yeah.
So that was back when you posted something, not only did all of your friends see it, but all your friends' friends saw it. And that's why it was an amazing tool. And it completely changed the processes of crowdfunding when Facebook shut the social graph. And there were, you know, entire businesses that went out of business when they did that, because like tons of businesses popped up on the Facebook open social graph. And oh, what the internet could have been. Anyway, they ruined democracy. It's fine. What I think is interesting is talking about these sort of like these moments when it was possible to do a certain thing, and now we have to think about kind of new modes. And there's a question from the audience about, if I'm a writer, what's the best way to find an animator to create an independent project with, and what are good things to keep in mind if you want to take that path? So things that I heard already are, go out and do your research and like look at a bunch of animation, and 2, start a dialogue. Like, don't jump in and be like, hey, want to work on this project with me? But what were some of the questions that you were asking? Like, how did you interrogate this to figure out, you know, who was good to work with?
Well, I would look at their body of work first and foremost to make sure that stylistically I felt like they could hit it, because just because what you're seeing on YouTube, they're doing their own personal style. That may not be the style that you want to do. So a lot of times I would just talk to them and see what the correspondence was like, either through video or at that time it was mostly through email. And if they were like on top of their email and like they would respond in a professional way, you kind of can read it and get a sense. But I also would look at like, you know, have they done this type of thing before? And what did that work end up looking like? So it's kind of like getting somebody's resume, you know, and seeing. And then once I knew what the work was going to be that I needed them to do, I would usually negotiate a rate that was based on like a per minute rate. Especially if I was having one person do the backgrounds and the character designs and the animation and the storyboards, I would work like on a per minute rate because, you know, just for context, a good animator can animate something around 20 seconds a week is kind of the max, right? It's slow. So you don't really want to get into, if you're working with an independent animator, I don't really feel like you want to get into an hourly because you can't really manage that at all. They could write down they work 20 hours, but how do you know? You know, so I was always like negotiating on a per minute rate. Like I have a minute of animation and these are all the things I need to do. What is your rate for doing that? And how long do you think it will take you? And because I knew like if they're just animating about 20 seconds a week, I was able to sort of build a schedule based on that. But you know, you do things when you're working like that where you actually see things rough. So before they color things, you see a rough animation pass, which is the animation. It's just the line work, and it could be really, really sketchy. But just to make sure that the characters are moving the way you want them to, the way that you're anticipating them. And then what they do is they do a cleanup pass where they do all the clean lines, and you look at it again. And now the lines are all clean, but there's no color, but it's all animated. Then you do the color pass, and that can be your final, you know, pass. And at that pass, you can probably pull a few other, what we call retakes or, you know, changes at that point.
So. This is really interesting because I think about, so I've produced narrative and I'm now producing a feature documentary. And producing a feature documentary is actually much more like what you're talking about because you can pull from archival and you can pull from interviews. And it's not like once you get it in the can, that's just what you have to work with. And you can cut it in different ways, but like those frames are what they are. There's so little. Yeah. And with documentary, there's a lot more. There's a lot more to play with. And also, by the way, we're talking about like what parts of this should be animated, which is so exciting because I'm like, then we could do anything.
Right, exactly.
Which is amazing. Mia Jo has a great question, which is trying to pull together a team to do web animation, but she's nervous about leading them. And you who work in leading teams to create animation, what are some of your like key sort of tips and tricks?
Well, here's the thing. I feel like animation is super collaborative with everybody. So you have to realize that you are dealing with artists, and artists are generally insecure. They're generally very critical of themselves. And so what I like to do is make sure that they feel supported. So if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I'm going to need a couple more days on this, it's not really going to be beneficial to be like, no, you said this was going to be done. Like, it's about having a dialogue and coming to a compromise, because as soon as you rule with an iron fist or crack the whip on an artist, what you do is you rob them of their creativity. You stress them out, which impedes their ability to work. And that happens to all of us, no matter what we're in, but especially when you're dealing with somebody who's putting their creative energy, putting their emotion into it. Like the artists and the animators, they're like actors. They have to emote. They have to draw things that make us feel something. So they have to put a lot of themselves into it. So in the way that I manage it as we are all a team. We are all equal. I may be slightly above you. You may come to me for critical decisions. And sometimes I will make decisions that are asking you to go a little bit above and beyond, or you don't feel like it's the right decision and you have to just go for it because I'm in the position of seniority. But I never want any artist to feel like their voice isn't heard and their opinion isn't considered, because I'm not an expert. I don't know what they're going through. And especially during this time, it's really important. It's something that we've been working at my company, Bento Box Entertainment. This is something that the company and me and my other producing partners on the show have really been trying to do, is to make sure that we're emotionally supporting our crew. Because we're all working from home now, and we can't just be in the office and like go up and say, hey, how's your day going? And you don't feel as much of a team when you're working so independently.
Yeah, I will add to that. Since we are now at Seed&Spark a team of 18, which is the largest we've ever been. And that's happened. Thank you. But that's happened. I mean, we've grown by a third during COVID. We're in 10 different states. I think it was Anil Dash who tweeted, and it just keeps coming back to me, that everyone in your life is having a time right now where if your friend were having it, you would drop everything and rush to their aid. Only literally everybody is having that time. And we're still asking artists to create, and we're still asking workers to work, and we're still asking parents to pay. Like, all of those demands are still happening, even as everyone's basically having the worst year of their lives. And of course, there are major stratifications in what worst means for people. But if everyone's having the worst year of their lives, like, just leading a team right now takes phenomenally more emotional energy than I think ever before. Because you didn't have the things, just like you said, like, you can't like show up with pastries one morning and like kick everyone off on the right foot. Like, you're so limited in your capacities. I feel like the internet will rage against me if I don't at least ask about party goats. So y'all, we're going to shift gears real quick, and we will come back to the animation questions. We have about 13 minutes left, but we have to talk about party goats. I feel like you came up with my dream company and a little bit of my dream life. My cousin and I the other day were like, how do we just buy a piece of land and fill it with goats? Tell us about Party Goats LA.
Sure. So as I mentioned when we first started talking, even though I'm not an artist, I do have a lot of creative energy. And unfortunately, because my job as a producer, I'm, hiring artists and, dealing with schedules and budgets and like just kind of making sure the production is running smoothly. That creative energy does not really get to, be expressed. So it has to go somewhere. And in the past, I started making independent cartoons, and then that served a purpose for me where I, built a career in animation off of that. I also still create independent ideas, and I've been pitching a show around, and I pitch to different networks and try to get a show picked up. So I do want to be a showrunner of an animated series. That's my ultimate career goal, and I'm still working on that. Anyways, about 3 years ago, I bought a piece of land in LA, in a little neighborhood that's still equestrian. If you haven't been to LA or live in LA, you probably don't know that there are so many equestrian communities in LA. It's really based on our Western roots. This was an old West town, and those areas have been preserved. So I bought a piece of property out here, and I'm not really far from anything, but I'm kind of tucked away in this little canyon. And I got a couple goats, and I was actually working on Rick and Morty season 3 at the time, and I was about to wrap that show, and I had no job coming up. And I just had this idea that, these goats were bringing me so much joy in my life that I was like, it's not fair to the goats, and it's not fair to me to just have this joy in my yard. Like, I wanted the goats to see the world. They're curious, happy animals. They love people. They love meeting new people, seeing new places. They love to actually work. They love to do like on-set and camera work. They're very smart. And I was just like, the world needs to know. Like, goats are not just stupid animals just sitting around doing nothing like you see at petting zoos. Like, They are just as intelligent as dogs, and they have a rich emotional life. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to start this business. Partygoats.com was available. I was like, this is a sign. So within 2 weeks, I set up partygoats.com. I got all the social media going. And within like 2 to 3 months, we were booking weekends full, like months and months in advance. And we've done over 1,000 events in the last 3 years. And, you know, until COVID happened, we were, you know, on track to have our most successful year yet. Last year was the most successful. We did 485 events. So if you do the math, that's a lot.
Wait, with 3 goats, or now you have a lot of goats?
I have 4 total, but, you know, usually I just work with the 2 smallest ones, mostly because people like to have goats jump on their back. And I actually have the only goats in the world that I know of that are actually trained to go to each person in a yoga class down the row and interact with them, and they know how to interact differently based on what position the person is in. So if you're in a position where your back is exposed, they know to jump all the way up on the back. They jump from back to back. If somebody's in a standing position, they test your balance. They put their 2 hooves up on you. They use their hooves to help deepen stretches and stuff. So, and also because we do a lot of TV and film work with them, you know, I wanted to make sure that they were trained. But then, you know, this year we're shut down because of COVID, which is okay. The goats and I needed a little bit of a break.
After 405 events, I should think you need a vacation.
Yeah, well, last year I didn't work in animation production. I took a year off. I worked on Cosmos Possible Worlds, which is, I think, starting to air on Fox right now. It's also on Nat Geo the whole season. So I was a supervising animation producer on that, and it was a really hard show. So I was like, I'm burned out. I need a break. So I just ran Party Goats last year and built that even bigger. But who knew that parties would not be a thing that you can do in 2020? So we'll get back to it. We'll get back to it.
By the way, I just want you to know that, like, while we're on this, our folks in our comments got on your site and made sure that everybody knew that it is Spanky, Pippin, Doc, and Gizmo, which are the 4 most perfect goat names.
Thank you. They're all named after TV and film. So, and maybe there might be a new one. I don't know. My husband keeps telling me no more goats. I promised I would get no more goats, but I kind of feel like there's a black one in my future, because that's the one color that I don't feel like I have that people ask for TV stuff. So if you want to see the goats in action, our website, partygoats.com, has a whole playlist of all the TV appearances we've done. The last thing that we shot before everything shut down was America's Got Talent. We did a fun little thing with the judges and the 2 goats, Gizmo and Doc. And then upcoming on Nickelodeon at the end of this month, we'll be on a new show called Unleashed, which is a pet competition and animal competition show. Similar to like America's Got Talent, but all pet acts. So we just shot that like 2 weeks ago.
Renee Valentine, quickly becoming my favorite person in the comments, just wanted to say to you, 1 more goat never hurt anybody.
Exactly. That's what I think. But you have to realize they're very high maintenance animals. To put it into perspective, goats poop every 30 minutes, and they poop about 20 to 30 little pellets, which is great because they don't smell. So it's not like having like a horse or something in your yard that is going to smell really bad. But that poop has got to go somewhere. So I am constantly shoveling that stuff. So just think about that before you get goats. And orchids too, because they're a herd animal. We could do a whole separate.
We need a whole separate on goat care.
Tell you everything you want to know about goats.
This is the dream that I want to have. My plan is next to move somewhere that has enough land to have goats. I took my kids recently to an Airbnb that was on a farm, and literally you open the back door and there's like a giant stable full of goats. And my daughter, who is 1, just decided that these were her people, and like was at their fence every day, climbed over the fence, made friends with the grumpiest one.
Yep.
So I think they're magic. This is amazing.
Yeah. People just don't know. They don't know like that they're like really cool. And the thing about goats is that they kind of respond to your energy. So if you're excited, they're excited. If you just want to be chill, they'll be chill. And it's great, especially when we're doing like a sound bath. The goats like to meditate with us, or if we're at a lively party, then they're the life of the party, and they'll put on like a show, like headbutting each other and stuff. So it's great. It's great to be able to bring people so much joy just by showing up with goats. Like we do goatgrams where you can send 2 goats to somebody wherever they are, work or school, and we just make their day. Like that's what it was birthed out of. It was birthed out of, let's bring more joy into the world.
It's so beautiful, and I'm so grateful for it. And honestly, it was like exactly the energy I needed to go into the weekend. Scout, thank you so much. I actually think this webinar has been like, it's the perfect thing to send to somebody who's like, I want to make an animation, but I'm scared. Like having this level of detail, understanding who you need to collaborate with, and also a reminder to producers that it is great to have a creative outlet, and that can be that can also bring a lot of joy to the world. I'm so grateful to you. If you had sort of one thing you wished you knew when you got started.
That's really good. I will tell you this. The thing that I have learned the most through COVID, but also through working in animation, is the importance of rest. Because I am a very driven person, and I just kept thinking, if I want to achieve what I got to achieve, I got to kill myself. I got 24/7, I got to do it. So I guess what I wish I had known was that it's okay to set a reasonable pace. And also, I would say, if you're thinking about working in animation, like I said in the beginning, think about what path you feel like is gonna cater to your strengths more. Are you more of an artist and an animator and you want to do the art part of it? Are you more of a director, or are you more a director/writer? Or are you more of somebody on the production end who wants to help these artists pull this thing together and bring it home? And whatever path you decide, there's no wrong path. But what I would say is, if you want to be a producer, you don't have to know anything to start. You'll learn on the job, and you just have to be fun to work with, take direction well, have a willingness to learn. That's all you need if you want to be in production. It's just organization, being good, all that stuff. If you want to be an artist, what I would recommend is, joining animation groups like a CIFA or Women in Animation, or there's also a great one right now that's going around on Instagram, like Drawing While Black. Like, find all those social networks where people are sharing their art. And I highly recommend, if you do want to work in animation as an artist, going to school for it. So going to Savannah College of Art and Design, going to Sheridan up in Canada, going to Cal Arts, or those are some of the big ones, but it doesn't matter. Just learn the process of animation in school, because it's really easy to get out of school and jump onto an animated show and start making good money, like, really quickly. The other piece of advice that I have for you is, really, if you want to work in animation and have a long career, you probably need to move to Los Angeles. There's some animation in Georgia, there's some in Texas, but most of the animation studios are in and around Burbank and Hollywood. Nickelodeon, DreamWorks, Disney, Cartoon Network, the studio I work at, Bento Box, Starburns, Stupid Buddy, like Titmouse, Netflix. I can keep going. Like Wild Canary, who does 3D animation. They're all here. And so that's your best bet. Even though we're all working remotely, at some point we're going to go back to the office, and it's much easier to get a job in animation if you live in Los Angeles. If you're outside of the world and you're outside of the United States and you want to go ahead and, work in animation and you want to be an animator, Canada has a lot of studios, both in Toronto and Vancouver, but there's also studios pretty much all around the world, from Ireland, New Zealand, Australia, Korea, China, Japan, like India, Tibet, like there's tons everywhere.
I'd like to be an animator in New Zealand right about now.
Yeah, no kidding.
A lot of goats in New Zealand. A lot of goats, a lot of sheep.
They do. Yeah.
This is amazing, Scout. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our participants today. You guys have been awesome. Great questions. So funny. I loved it. And thank you to Animation World Network and Kaleidoscope for partnering with us on this wonderful creative sustainability session. You think I would know the names of those by now. There will be one coming up next month, and you can always look at seedandspark.com/events for all of the upcoming events. These, while we present them all for free, and we will always present them all for free, I just want to say that they're not free to present. So we will drop a link in the comments where if you have $1, $10, however many dollars you want to keep these creative sustainability sessions going and always free to present, we would really appreciate it. learn.seedandspark.com/contribute. Make sure it is HTTPS or it will give you an error. And we're really grateful for any support you can provide. Scout, thank you so much. And we will see you hopefully you and your goats very soon.
Yes, definitely. Everybody take care, and good luck out there. If you have the drive, you're going to make it. Don't worry about it. Just keep going.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.